I will represent and solve three-digit dividend division with divisors of 2, 3, 4, and 5 numerically. So what that means is in lesson 27 we were dividing three-digit numbers with divisors of 2, 3, 4, and 5, but we were not just doing it numerically. We were using place value disk, and today we're just going to be using long division or standard algorithm. It means the same thing, to divide. So go ahead and get your journal ready. And I want you to put today's date, and I want you to write solve three-digit division problems. Whenever you get confused about what to do, whenever you are using the standard algorithm or long division, you can always think back to place value and your disk, okay? Because we're going to start today with what we did in problem 27 just to get your brain working. So I want you to go ahead and draw me a place value disk, or excuse me, a place value chart showing thousands, hundreds, tens, and ones. And actually, you won't need the thousands. You can just do hundreds, tens, and ones. And I want you to go ahead and show disk of 2, 9, and 7 to show 297. And then I want you to notice that we are dividing this into 4 groups. I only have 3 lines drawn here, but it should be 4 groups. So make sure you count. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then when you're ready, press play and we'll come back and we'll divide. Okay, we're going to use place value disk. At the same time, we're also going to use standard algorithm. And it's really important that you go back and forth and do this with me, because what this does is if you think about what's happening here and you relate that to what's happening in here, then you'll be able to do this standard algorithm no problem. But if you don't really think about what you're doing when you divide, you're just trying to memorize steps, you will forget the steps. So let's take a minute to look at what we're going to do first. When we divide, we always start with a large number first. So we're going to start with the hundreds. Now when you take a look here, I've got 2 hundreds, but I have 4 boxes. I can't do anything with these. I can't put any of them here because I don't have enough. So there's a couple of things you can do. The first thing you can do is you can just say, okay, I have 0 in each group, and 0 times 4 is 0. So you're going to leave a remainder of 2. Sometimes people just skip that step and they go right straight to, okay, I've got to take these 2 hundredths and I have to decompose them into 10 so that I can divide them. So that means you're going to put 20 hundredths over here. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so, oops, let's go back because I skipped that step. All right, so we've got 20 hundredths, so I'm going to put 10 here and 10 here. So we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 1 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So now instead of 9 tens, I have 29 tens. So when I come over here to my standard algorithm, I have 29. So you could do it like this and think to yourself, there's 0 here, and you take away 0 hundredths, and that leaves 29. Some people do it like this, which I kind of do too, and your parents probably do too. But I usually think to myself, well, 2 is too small to divide by 4, so I think of this as 29. And then I think of 29 divided by 4. So I kind of skip that step of putting the 0 up here, but you can do it either way. So now I'm going to take my 29 tens and I'm going to divide them by 4. Well, I know that 7 times 4 is 28. So I'm going to go ahead and put 7 in each box. That's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. There's another 7. 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. There's another 7. 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. So there's another 7. So I used all of these tens except for 1 because I had 29 and I used 28. So when I come over here, notice if you skip the step of putting the 0 there, when I put 7 to show that I have 7 tens in each group, the 7 has to go in the tens place. So 7 times 4 is 28. 29 minus 28 is 1. There's my remainder of 1. I've got to come over here and decompose this 10 by adding it to the ones place. So I'm going to put 10 ones over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So now instead of having 7 ones, I have 17. That's why this turns to 17. This 7 comes down and joins that 10. Now I have 17. So when I take 17 and I divide it by 4, I know that 4 times 4 is 16, so I'm going to put 4 in each group. So that used up all of them except for 1. I used 16 of the ones. So when I come over here and say I have 4, 4 times 4 is 16, and when I subtract that, I have a remainder of 1. So let's see if our quotients match. So this says I have 74, remainder 1. Here in each group I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 70, 74, and here's my remainder of 1. Okay? So Now that we have our answer, we are going to use multiplication to check it. So in your journal, I want you to go ahead and I want you to solve 74 times 4. So somewhere in your journal, I want you to write 74 times 4, and I want you to work it out and see what you get. And then when you get your answer, I want you to come back. All right, so when you worked it out, this is what you should have had, 296. And you have to add 1 because we had a remainder of 1. So we can see that our answer, or when we check the problem, it does check out. It does match. So 297 divided by 4 is 74, remainder 1. So go ahead and get your problem set. Today we are not going to use place value disk unless you need to. If you look at your directions, it says divide. Check your work by multiplying. Draw disk on a place value chart as needed. So that means you don't have to draw the disk unless you are confused. If you need to get a separate piece of paper or you need to use this area to be able to understand, I want you to do that. I'm just going to use standard algorithm. All right, so I have 574, and I'm going to divide that by 2. So remember, when you divide, you start with the hundreds place first. So 5 divided by 2, I'm thinking to myself, 1 times 2 is 2, that's not enough. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 2 is 6, that's too much, so I'm going to say 2. Because 2 times 2 is 4. And when I subtract, that leaves a remainder of 100. I'm going to take this 100 and I'm going to add it to the tens. So now I have 17 tens. So I think, what can I multiply times 2 to get as close to 17 as I can? So I know that 8 times 2 is 16. So 8 times 2 is 16. And then I have 1 10 left over. I'm going to add this 1 10 to the 4 ones. So now I have 14 ones. I know that 7 times 2 is 14, so I have a remainder of 0. It says to check your work by multiplying. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to choose 287 times 2, and I'm going to check my work. 7 times 2 is 14, 8 times 2 is 16, plus 1 is 17, 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5, so it checks. 574, 574. All right, so I have 861 divided by 3. If you feel like you like to try to divide this one by yourself, pause the video and go ahead. If you are still really struggling to understand, just follow along with me. All right, so I'm going to start with the big place first. I have hundreds, 800s. So I think to myself, 2 times 3 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. I can't use 3, that's too much, so I've got to use 2. 2 times 3 is 6. That leaves me with 200s. I'm going to add that to the 6 tens, and I'm going to take 26 and divide it by 3. So I'm thinking to myself, 8 times 3 is 24. That's as close as I can get without going over, because 9 times 3 is 27. Now when I subtract, I have 2. I'm going to add that to my 1, so now I've got 21 ones. Well, I know that 7 times 3 is exactly 21, so that leaves me with a remainder of 0. So let's check and see if we're correct. 287 times 3. 7 times 3 is 21. 8 times 3 is 24, plus 2 is 26. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 2 is 8. I have 861 and 861. All right, let's go to the next one. 354 divided by 2. So anytime you feel like, hey, I want to try one by myself, pause the video and try it by yourself. And when you get stuck, you can always press play and see how I did it. All right, so I'm going to take 300s and divide it by 2. There is 1 2 in each group, so that's 1 times 2 is 2. That means I had 100 left over. I'm going to add that to my 5 tens. Now I have 15 divided by 2. So 7 times 2 is 14. When I get 1, I'm going to add that to my 4 ones, so I've got 14 again. So I know 14 divided by 2 is 7, and 7 times 2 is 14. That leaves me with a remainder of 0. Now I'm going to check my math. 177 times 2. 7 times 2 is 14. 7 times 2 is 14, plus 1 is 15. 1 times 2 is 2, plus 1 is 3. So it checks out. 300. Now I'm going to take 354 and divide it by 3. So I'm thinking to myself, if I have 3, what times 3 will get me as close to 3 as possible? And that will be 1. 1 times 3 is 3. So when I subtract, I have no hundreds left over. So I'm going to add my tens to this. I've got 5 tens. 5 tens divided by 3 is 1. 1 times 3 is still 3. That leaves 2 10s left over. So I'm going to add that to my 4 ones. 24 ones divided by 3 is 8. 8 times 3 is 24. I have a remainder of 0. So I'm going to take 118 and multiply it times 3 to check my division. 8 times 3 is 24. 1 times 3 is 3 plus 2 is 5. And 1 times 3 is 3. So I've got 354 and 354. All right, now I'm going to take 873 and divide it by 4. I've got 873 divided by 4. So I think to myself, 8 divided by 4 is what? Well, I know 2 times 4 is 8. So that's going to leave me with no hundreds. I'm going to add my 7 10s to that. I can't do 2 again because that would be too much. I can only do 1. 1 times 4 is 4. That's going to leave me with 3 10s. I add that to the 3 1s. Well, 8 times 4 is 32. So I'm going to put 8 in my quotient. And when I subtract, that's going to leave me with a remainder of 1. All right, so now I'm going to check. 218 times 4. 8 times 2 is 32. 1 times 4 is 4, plus 3 is 7. 2 times 4 is 8. But don't forget, you have to add your remainder. So when I come back and I add 1, that gives me 873. So they match. Okay, last one on the front. So I've got 591 divided by 5. So if I take 5 and put it into 5 groups, that means there's 1 in each group. 1 times 5 is 5, so I have no hundreds left over. So now I'm going to divide the 10s. So I can't do 2 because 2 times 5 is 10, so I'm going to do 1 again. 1 times 5 is 5, so that leaves 4 10s left over. I add that to my 1s, now I've got 41. 8 times 5 is 40, so that's going to leave me with a remainder of 1. Now I'm going to check. 118 times 5. 8 times 5 is 40. 1 times 5 is 5, plus 4 is 9. 1 times 5 is 5. Now I'm going to add my remainder, and that gives me 591. So, all right, let's look on the back. Again, if you think you're ready to try one by yourself, go ahead. You might not want to try on this one. It's a little bit different. You might want to walk through this one with me on this one because you're going to notice this one's a little bit different. I'm going to show you how it's different. So when I look here and I have a 2, and I'm thinking to myself, how many can I put in each group if I only have 2 and I'm trying to make 3 groups? I can't do any. So remember, you can put a 0 here, and you can say 0 times 3 is 0, and that's going to leave you with 2 hundreds left over. And then you're going to add that to your 7 10s. Now I've got 27 divided by 3, which is 9. 9 times 3 is 27. 27 minus 27 is 0. I'm going to add that to my 5 1s. That would be 1 in each group, and 1 times 3 is 3. That's going to leave me with a remainder of 2. Now this 0 has no value, so the answer is 91 remainder 2. So I'm going to take 91, and I'm going to multiply it times 3, and that gives me 3 and 27, because 9 times 3 is 27. When I add my 2, that gives me 275, so my answer's check. So let's try this one. So I've got 5, and I'm going to divide 459. So again, I've got 400s, and if I have 4 and I'm trying to put it into 5 groups, I don't have enough. So this would be 0. So 0 times 5 is 0. I bring that down. I have 4 hundreds left over. I'm going to add that to my 5 10s. So 45 divided by 5 is 9. 9 times 5 is 45. I have no 10s left over, so I'm going to bring down my 1s. I can't do 2 5s because I don't have enough, so I'm just going to do 1. 1 times 5 is 5, and that leaves me with a remainder of 4. So again, the 0 has no value, so the answer is 91 remainder 4. So let's check. 91 times 5. 1 times 5 is 5. 9 times 5 is 45. And I'm going to add my remainder of 4. That gives me 459. So my answers do match. Let's do the last 2 problems before we have our 1 application problem at the bottom. All right, so we're going to take 678 and divide it by 4. So I have 678. So if I have 6 and I'm trying to put them into 4 groups, that would be 1 in each group. So 1 times 4 is 4, so I have 2 hundreds left over. So I add that to 7 10s. Well, 8 times 4 is 24. 9 times 8 times 4 is 32. 7 times 4 is 28, so I'm going to do 6. 6 times 4 is 24. That leaves 3 tens. I'm going to add that to the 8 ones. Well, 9 times 4 is 36. That's going to leave me with the remainder of 2. And I'm going to check 169 times 4. 9 times 4 is 36. 2 times 4 is 24. Plus 3 is 27. 1 times 4 is 4, plus 2 is 6. I'm going to add my remainder of 2, and that gives me 678. So they check. All right, so last problem like this. I'm going to take 955 divided by 4. If you haven't felt confident enough to try any of these by yourself, I want you to try this one by yourself and see if you can do it, and then come back. All right, so I know 2 times 4 is 8. 9 minus 8 is 1. I'm going to add my 5 tens to that. When I take 15 and divide it by 4, that gives me 3. 3 times 4 is 12. That leaves me with 3 tens. I'm going to add that to my 5 ones. 9 times 4 is 36, so that's too much. I have to do 8. 8 times 4 is 32, and that leaves me with a remainder of 3. I've got 238 times 4. 8 times 4 is 32. 3 times 4 is 12, plus 3 is 15. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9. I'm going to add my remainder of 3. So 2 plus 3 is 5, 5, and 9, so they match. All right, last problem. All right, so we have an application problem here, and it says Zach filled 581 1-liter bottles with apple cider. He distributed the bottles evenly to 4 stores. How many liter bottles did each of the stores receive? Were there any bottles left over? If so, how many? Okay, so that was my read. Now I'm going to draw. I'm going to draw a tape diagram because this is a total problem. I know that he has a total of 581 1-liter bottles. Okay, so that's my total. 581 bottles. And he's going to put them into 4 stores. So I've got 1, 2, 4 stores. And I know that each of these are going to be exactly the same. What I'm trying to figure out is how much is going to each store and if there are any left over. So I will use division. I'm going to take 581 and I'm going to divide it by 4. So I've got 5 divided by 4 is 1. I subtract my 400s. That leaves me with 100. I add my 8 tens to that. So I'm thinking to myself, how many times does 4 go into 18? And that would be 4. 4 times 4 is 16. That leaves me with a remainder of 2. I'm going to add my 1. So now I've got 21 divided by 4. Well, 6 times 4 is too much. So I'm going to go with 5 times 4 because that's 20. And that's going to leave me with a remainder of 1. So it says, how many liter bottles did each of the stores receive? It doesn't make sense to say each store received 145 remainder 1 bottles. You can't say that. They didn't receive a remainder 1. Each store received 145 bottles. And the next question is, were there any bottles left over? If so, how many? So I'm just going to say with 1 left over. Okay, so today when you get ready to practice this, make sure that you come back and use your problem set if you get confused. If you need to come back and re-listen to part of the video, you should do that. If you find that you're having a hard time trying to figure out how many 4s are in 18 and how many 4s are in 20, that's a multiplication problem. So you've got to make sure that you're practicing your facts as much as you can because that'll make this process much easier.